So hello and welcome. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you, and I hope you are too. Today I'm joined by Nicole Brulé-Walker, who is the owner of Sequoia Wellbeing. And obviously, with a name like Sequoia Wellbeing, we want to know more, Nicole. So how did your business come about, and tell us about the name as well?
Okay. Well, I'd actually been in health and well-being for a really long time. We're now sort of over 20 years. Sequoia Wellbeing actually came a little bit later down the line because I felt that my work had really transitioned away from where I traditionally trained and that I was doing things much, much differently. And so Sequoia for me was a connection to Canada, which is where I'm from. So they're found on the West Coast in Canada and the States. And I really liked the idea that they were these huge trees that live forever, but yet they needed this really shallow root system and they needed to be with other trees. And so I think it just was a lovely analogy for how much we need one another. And sometimes our root systems do need nurturing and strengthening through being in contact with other people. And from a well-being perspective, I think us being at our best really makes a difference to that, how much we can bring to ourselves and to other people by feeling well.
Yeah, I love that analogy. So tell us more about the background, how you came into the business anyway.
It's a funny kind of story, really. I actually was in the Canadian Army for 5 years.
Wow.
And at that point in time, I had no idea whatsoever what I wanted to do. I was originally set for studying graphic arts. I did that for 1 year. And I loved the work, but I hated the whole sort of criticism. At that point in time, I wasn't very good with criticism. And I just felt it wasn't a career move for me. It was something that there was something else out there for me. And because I didn't know what that was, I joined the army in Canada, I think wanting to kind of prove something to myself about myself, that I could actually do it, and was quite successful doing that. But one of the things that really fascinated me was injuries. And when you were doing training, you would have one person who would be sent home immediately and return to the unit. And another person would have to leave the army altogether. And another person would be better in 2 weeks. And it just made me utterly fascinated with the idea that, although we had similar complaints in a similar area of the body, how is it that each person experiences it in such a different way?
Yeah, fascinating. And that's how you started your company, your business.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a bit of a tumbly background. I worked professionally in sport for a while, which was great. But when I moved to the UK in 2001, it was really the people that came into the clinic that said, I don't know where this pain comes from. I just woke up with it and I don't know what I've done. And it just, to me, I wanted to know the why. I think I have a very inquisitive nature.
And so do you work from, is it very much, your training, your experience, or is it intuition? How do you help people understand this pain and the roots of the pain and how to overcome them?
It is probably a combination of quite a few things. I do have a lot of experience. I am very clinically trained in how to orthopedically assess joints and movement. And, I just take it one step further. I look at breath work. I look at emotions. I look at mindset and how that all comes together to bring people where they are with that injury. And so when people are having recurrent injuries and they've not had success with other treatments, my approach is just entirely different.
It may be obvious to you, but how did you come across the idea? Because it's growing, but I don't think it's very common knowledge or widely accepted, this mind-body connection thing. So how did that come about for you?
Partly personal, personal experience. And I think, when you start combining personal experience and professional knowledge and expertise, there's a really amazing connection there and a really amazing moment. And for me, it wasn't a great moment in life. I was going through quite a stressful time and we had been asked to leave our home of sort of 16 years and we were handed a Section 21 eviction, basically. And I think sort of, the landlord simply just wanted the property back to do something else with it. It wasn't as though there was anything wrong, but you end up with this sort of feeling like you've done something wrong. There's a stigma attached to being evicted. And I think just having to uproot everything after thinking we would be in the same place forever, which is what we were promised originally, it just really shook the foundations. Everything was having to move. My business had to relocate. We had to close another family business and basically make several people redundant, and just the whole time was so stressful. And on top of that, just finding somewhere to live. And, sort of 3 months later, I was just having really vague symptoms and had a few episodes of being really sick. And I went to the doctors and they did, the routine blood work. And it actually came back that I had cancer markers that were elevated to 185 and they should be around 35.
Wow.
And, in my heart of hearts and in my head and in everything about me just said, this isn't cancer. But you have to follow down that pathway. You have to go through it. And it was about 6 weeks of just unlimited tests because they were so sure there was something there. And they couldn't find anything on all the tests and all the scans and MRIs and everything that I had. And so, once I got through that, I sort of looked back at it and I could see that I was probably burying a lot of the stress from the previous few months and in the lead up to that, and how it was really impacting on me and how all these things sort of came together. And when I really started focusing on my well-being in terms of I didn't necessarily have physical things in terms of injuries per se, but I had lots of little things going on, the types of things that most people would ignore and just think, I'll feel better next week or tomorrow.
Yeah.
And let it go. And when you have these collections of things going on, it's so easy just to dismiss it. And actually, that's the time where your body's just screaming for some help. And so you really need to sit up and take notice.
Before I set up my business, I was very unhappy in this corporate job I had. And I started to feel ill. I lost a lot of weight very quickly. And I just felt ill and I knew something was wrong. And I don't really get ill, touch wood, and never go to the doctors. But I felt that there must be something seriously wrong. So I actually took myself off to my GP just to get checked over. There was nothing wrong physically. And that's when I just realized, I guess, that, okay, this is down to you being miserable where you are. You're depressed. But when you get these physical symptoms, is that your body saying, as you said, screaming out to tell you to look inwards at what's going on in your life, or what's going on there? Or is it actually, look, you need to take notice of that injured back or whatever? And what do you think is ongoing?
I think it goes a lot deeper than that, really. And for me, the biggest aspect of well-being that I think is probably the most important and the one that is probably lowest on our priority is emotional well-being. And if we're unhappy and you're kind of just getting by in life and making do with situations that don't favor us, we've got an opportunity to change it. And a lot of people stay in jobs that they don't necessarily like because it's secure and it's something that brings in an income. And of course, financially, people don't want to be in a precarious position. I completely understand that. But I think what we have to then do is look at within ourselves, what can we do to change within ourselves to deal with it better? Because of course, stress happens in life and it's natural, but it is how we deal with it that really proves how strong we are and how resilient we are and how healthy we are. And if we're not dealing with it in a positive way and having an outlet or support for that, then we run into problems and it then impacts on the physical side of things. I think by the time it hits physical symptoms, you're already pretty far down the line.
Yeah. So what happens when somebody comes to you for help?
My first assessments are super long. Most people are sort of used to being whizzed in and out of an appointment at the doctors or the GPs in 10 minutes. I spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours with somebody. And we look at everything. We look at any trauma, any injury, how you feel, what you're thinking, and how all that kind of comes together. And from a movement perspective, when I'm looking at injuries or things that are maybe more physical or feel more physical, it's a case of looking from the ground up and seeing how all the joints move in conjunction with one another. Because, we're so much in medicine now about this is where the pain is. So for example, if you have knee pain, everybody goes immediately for the knee, treats the knee, gives you all kinds of things around the knee. It doesn't quite go far enough. And so quite often what I find, and I've had a lot of people who've been able to not have hip replacements or knee replacements simply by finding the root cause. Quite often in a knee, it ends up being down at your feet or in your hip, and your body's just adapted over the years of things happening to you. And it isn't an age thing. It's just you've been on the planet a little longer and more things have happened to you.
And so where do you see or is it just an unknown yet? Where do you want to take the business, or do you see yourself going down particular pathways, or what do you see for psychology
Um,
well-being?
I think the root of what I do and what I love about it is being able to help educate people a little bit more about their bodies and the simple ways that they can feel better and, become more in touch with themselves. Because I think when we're in a society where everything demands our attention constantly and we're being bombarded by terrible news most of the time, when you listen to any radio or television news, it's so easy to just become really disconnected from who you are and how you're feeling. And I think really that's the only way out of it, is you have to create that connection and space to really check in with yourself and understand where you're at, and then have the resources to deal with it. So for me, I think I've started it already. It's not quite where I want it yet, but it's an online platform. People join in for classes online over Zoom. So that means anyone can join. But what I run over time is sort of runs of particular classes to deal with specific problems, so that I can help educate people and give them the right steps in order to help them feel better. Because I think a lot of people sit waiting to see somebody, and you want help now. And it's a really good way to access that help immediately.
That sounds amazing. And do you see a growing trend, or is it because there's a lot, as you say, the news is always awful, but a lot of it over the last few years has been bashing the NHS. And do you think that there is a move away from relying on the NHS or your GP, trying to get an appointment with your GP and therefore being given a prescription for drugs? Is there a move away from that to more natural healing, or what are you seeing?
I hope so. I certainly hope so. I think people are more open to trying things than they were. One of the things, I suppose, I'm in the lucky position to be able to compare. In Canada, we didn't necessarily have the provision of healthcare that you have with the NHS here. So I think we're incredibly lucky, but I think so many people try to access it for things that they could usually help themselves with. And that overburdens the situation, and then it becomes a failing entity, which it is now, really. I mean, there's amazing people working in it and there's great things happening, but they just are so overtaxed. And I do think that that is going to push people down the road of actually looking for their own solutions and trying to find ways of getting better without that.
Yeah. And is there, again, in your opinion, and in the patients, I don't know if you call them patients that you see, have you noticed trends in dis-ease or injuries, or is there a trend that you can sort of attribute to something going on? I don't know if that's what you experience, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, stress is a huge one, and I think it's really coming to the forefront. And I mean, when you look at statistically, there is 79% of people in the workforce are stressed and report regular occurrences of stress in the workplace. And so I think that there has to be a little bit more done. The problem in the workplace well-being front is that there are all these apps and all these different things that happen, but the uptake on them is so poor. And I think there needs to be a different solution. And injuries themselves actually create a huge amount of days lost in the workforce. Mental illness is another one. And, the businesses are putting on things for their staff, but maybe just not quite the right thing. So I think that's an evolving space, and I'd like to see it sort of just change a little bit to make it more effective.
Yeah. And so with that, I mean, again, this may be something that already happens. I don't know, because it's not sort of my world, but I know that some employers will have health care for their teams, and it will be covered by insurance. And are your more natural approaches covered or within that kind of health insurance? So I don't know whether
no, and that's something that I think needs to change, because I think by and large, when you look at insurance and you look at how the medical system really works, they wait until we're sick and injured, and then everything kind of kicks in. And it's the same for insurances. So I think that there needs to be a bigger drive, and I'm not quite sure how that would happen, but there needs to be a bigger drive towards prevention. And I think we're kind of seeing it in that there's a lot of epigenetic testing available now, and there are more sophisticated blood works that you can have done. These are mostly private. People are going down that road and actually looking at, how can I make lifestyle changes that will really impact on my health so that I protect my future and I don't have to go down that road of being ill or infirmed?
Yeah. What's your advice to people who want to, I don't know, maybe they're just not feeling well, maybe they're feeling a bit overweight, whatever, or they've got injuries. What's your advice for somebody who actually wants to turn their life around, who thinks, right, I'm fed up with this lack of energy, feeling tired all the time, feeling angry or whatever. What's like the top tip if they wanted to change all that round?
I think really is trying to get some clarity on how all of those things interlink with one another and what the root cause is, because I think without the root cause, you're then just chasing symptoms. And what you can do is end up chasing a bit of something, then chasing a bit of something else and a bit of something else. And really it's all down to the same root cause. So I think the more you can sort of dig down and find that root cause, you will get to the bottom of everything, and it will clear so quickly as a result of that. But if you're just sort of thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to try for 6 weeks to really sleep better, or I'm going to try for 3 months to eat better, you're kind of just attacking the symptoms of what's really going on. And it's just so important to get to the root cause of why those things aren't optimal. And I think I'm an everything in moderation person. I don't preach to people. I try to find solutions that are relevant to them and fit into your life, because I think if you don't have time for something, or you perceive that you haven't got time for something, it won't happen.
Yeah. And so how do they find out more about you, Nicole? Is there a website or a telephone, whatever, an email, whatever? Where do they go to find out more?
Yeah, of course. So there's a website at sequoiawellbeing.com. I'm on all the social media channels under Sequoia Wellbeing or my own name, Nicole Brulé-Walker. And you can always email me at nicole@sequoiawellbeing.com.
Excellent. And maybe just in case, Sequoia is spelled Sequoia.
Yes.
There you are. That's how you find Sequoia. So just check out the tree and you'll find Nicole there with her roots ready for you. Thank you so much, Nicole. Actually, thinking about it, one more question before I let you go. So, if I'm we're talking about business here as well as health and well-being and all these things, but it is ultimately a business. So based on your own experience, what advice would you give to somebody? So if I'm here and saying, Nicole, you've done really well in your business, what number one piece of advice would you give me if I'm setting up my business?
Always make time for yourself.
Ooh, I love that. That is so glorious.
It's such it's the thing that we find the easiest to put to one side, but is generally the most important thing. And I think as long as you give yourself that, whatever form it looks like, it could be setting better boundaries, it could be self-care, it could be, having work done with somebody else professionally as a therapist or a counselor or something, but always, deal with things head on and make time to do that, because it will pay off exponentially.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such a sound piece of advice, because most of us, it takes us 10 years to discover that was the most important thing we should have done right at the beginning. So that's great advice. Thank you so much, Nicole. It's been great speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you for having me. It's been great.